Okay, so what we're doing is we are recreating some code I made here that's got a group of divs, and it has this little JavaScript array here that contains each of the IDs of those divs. Remember, IDs are unique, so we have to have 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. And then we're going to make a loop that goes through each of those, and value 0 of the array would be the first HTML object, etc. We're getting a random color here through math.floor, math.random. Now this you don't need to worry about knowing. This is just a way to make an HTML or CSS acceptable color. And then random is just a random number up to about 6 digits here that we can use. So current is going to be equal to the current box as it iterates through this. First it will say B0, which will equal this first element here. And then next time it loops through after it increments. Now keep in mind it will only increment to 6 characters because it's checking for the length 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it will only loop until it gets to that box.length and increment each time. So first it will be B0, the first element, and that is put in as the ID down here. So it will access the B0 element first, and then next round B1, next round B2, etc. So it's going through and changing each of these one by one. I'm logging these just because as I was making this helps me see how things are working. Now is equal to the document.element by ID current. Once again, current over here is set to be B0, then B1, then B2, to iterate through each of those. So each time it's setting the current one to the style, a background color, and then because we have this before a hexadecimal number, and colors are often hexadecimal CSS, it's adding this as text in front of this, which is the random color generated up here. Once again, in the hexadecimal format. And then we have a function click here. So what this is doing is when we click, it's going to access this function clicky. So clicky will run the blocks of code in here. It's going to let us know that fired because the first thing you want to test is to make sure if a function is not working, you want to make sure it's being triggered in the first place. So we check that here. And then we have a random color equals math.floor, same thing we have over here. What we need this to do though is be generated for each element so it's not all the same color. So we have for I equals 0, box.length, I++. We're going to do the same thing here, console.log, box I. We're going to check that it's going to each element 0, 1, 2, 3 in order. We're going to check that the box.length is correct because that's how many times this should iterate. We're going to have a random color random here, so this is generated once again when it's clicked each time to generate a new one for each element. Now the reason I have it in the loop is if this random color were not in the loop, then it would generate for the entire function. Once it's clicked, it would make one color for everything. But our goal is to have it make one color for each element, so they're different. That means it has to iterate this many times and create this many colors that are applied on one-to-one ratio to each element. So first it will say B0 and it gets its own color here, and then when it iterates back through the loop here, B1 will get its own distinct color here, and then B2 it's going to run this again because it's inside this code block. It will get its own distinct color, etc. So kind of the same steps as up above. We're just creating it now. It's triggered by a click. And then this eventually, I'm going to have it where this randomly moves things around the screen, but for now we don't have to worry about that part. I've included some of the codes in Classroom, but I just cut out some of the middle part. So, Jackson, it looks like you're looking at how to do the math stuff here. So the first thing we're going to want to tackle is how to initially iterate through and set up the colors for each element individually when the page is first triggered. So our click event is going to handle the clicking part later where you can change it, right? But for now, we just want to set it up initially. So I can see, that's weird. For some reason, it's going to a black screen when I try and view your screen now. I'm going to make a new version of this and just cut out some of the parts. So we can see it on our screen if we need to. So basically, the first thing I'm doing here is I'm making a script of type text JavaScript. And then we have a constant, which is the amount of elements that are up here. So Jackson, what's the first thing you did? Okay, so a for loop to start. So it's basically a function, so we always have parentheses in it. We tell it what the initial value of I is. And in this case, arrays or indexes are always start 0, so we're just going to roll with it here because that fits what we need. So I equals 0. Then we use a semicolon, and then we set the next part. We tell it how many times it's going to loop. So in that case, it's I is less than box dot length semicolon. And the way I get that is I can see my constant box here, the array that holds each of the values, has length 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this makes sure, because we could set it manually, we could say I is less than 6, right? But here's a problem. Later we learn how to append lists or remove items from lists or arrays. So if I go through later and I remove or add a value here, this is not going to work anymore. But it's dynamic if we don't explicitly state the value. Instead of saying I is less than 5 or 6, if I say I is less than box.length, it will always be correct because it's always checking the value of this to make sure it loops the right amount of times. Alright, next we need to tell it what to do for each loop. Well, we're going to increment I. So I++ will take the current value and it will add 1 to it. Now what we need to tell it next is code blocks and curly braces here to execute this many times. So Jackson, what's the first thing you executed in the code block of the for? What's that? Oh, what's the first thing you want to execute in the code block for the for loop? Yeah. Let me see if I can view your screen here now. It wasn't working before, but we'll try it out. I guess either like what you think should happen first. So we've got our for loop set up here to iterate 6 times. I think what I'll do first is I will make a variable to capture the value of each of these as an ID, right? Because what we need to do is get the ID of each of these and use it for each one to set HTML for it, right? So I'm going to set a current, so that whatever one it's on is basically an ID. So current could equal something like box I, So as it loops through 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., it's going to automatically go through this array to the current one. Now, this needs to be in document as well, right? So there's several ways we could do this. We could save box I to current, and then later we could say documents dot get element by ID dot or current, right? Because that would translate to whatever box it's on, 0, 1, 2, 3. Or we could try and do it here. Let's see if we put document dot get element by ID. Actually, we don't need to even do that. We can just put this. So with this, we want to see what current is evaluating to. So let's put console.log. And then we'll say current. So this is a good way to tell if it's correct and we're getting the correct value we need. So I'll save that. I'll right click and do inspect. Now here's a cool little trick. Jackson, check this out. If we go to, I'm trying to think where they put it in here. Oh, watch, up here. Now to get this, I just right clicked and did inspect, right? And I'm in Chrome. If I go to watch, I can actually add a variable to watch, and if you type it in, it will look for it. So I'll say current. Boom. Now see, this is showing me div b5 div group, and I can look at a bunch of information. So just be aware, and you can refresh it here. This watch thing for variables is kind of cool. It's pretty useful, right? Now this isn't doing anything yet because I don't have anything set for the button. I'm just going to refresh it. If you need to clear this console, you can do it here. But this is showing me it's iterating through each of these. So what does this tell me, Jackson? Well, current is actually setting up for the proper value, right? It's working. That's what it tells me here, because when I do console.log current, I can see that current is grabbing the proper HTML for each one, right? It's grabbing 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I can tell that because these are correct. Does that kind of make sense? Okay. If these weren't correct, I would know that I have it looping through this wrong and it's not grabbing the values it should, but they're showing up as actual HTML objects. Now, I like putting semicolons at the end of lines. It's not a strict requirement. Alright, so the next thing I might want to do here is put in my stuff that grabs some random number or color things. Once again, I don't expect you to recognize that or know how to do that off the top of your head, so I'm just going to make sure this is open. I'm going to grab my two color things here. So this is giving me my random color. And then this I have just in case I need a random number that's not some crazy giant, 16-digit, or I mean hexadecimal monstrosity. So if I say current, I'm actually accessing the documents get element by ID box for each one. So what I want to do is alter the style of each one as it loops through here. And I need to add a hash sign as a normal string in front of my random color. And the reason I'm doing that is because hexadecimal stuff it needs to be written like this, and it needs to have a hashtag in front. So this is just a mathematical formula here to get the RGB values under hexadecimal. So that's fine. I'll just say this. I'm going to save this and see what happens so far. Okay, clicking's still not doing anything because we haven't set that up, but okay, this is working for each element. It's set to a separate color, which was my goal. Now, if we were to replicate this inside a click to value, so I'm just going to copy all this, we could go up here and say clicky, because this onClick is triggering a function named clicky. So I will make a function named clicky. It's not being passed any values as parameters, so that is empty. And I'll have it do the same stuff each time you click it. Okay, that is working so far. Now we could do some other stuff. We could try and make it where more space is added between each of the elements each time you click it, like the X and Y value. Now we'd probably have to come up here to the div. We could put an absolute positioning with the top and left value in CSS and try and alter that. Or let's see what our other options are. Another idea I have is we could affect just the vertical padding. So each time it's clicked, it's going to run this function. And we could say each time it's clicked, then current, which is how we access our current element as it loops through each one. Dot style dot padding. I'm guessing padding top, since background color usually uses dash and no capital. I'm guessing it'll be the same for this, but let's see. JavaScript vertical padding. Well, we'll try this out and see if it works. So we're taking the current, whichever iteration it's on here, 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. And for each one, we're saying the current.style.padding value.top, whatever it currently has as a padding value, is equal to pad. And then we're changing the current.style.padding top to its current value times I. So for the first element, it will be times 0. For the second, it will be times 1. For the third, times 2, etc. And each time it's clicked, that should change. So let's see if that does anything here. Nothing yet. So we'll console.log pad to see what kind of value it's pulling up. See if that gives us any hints. Nothing in here. Let's try and investigate if padding top is something. So they do have a padding top here. We do need to add pixels to it too, which might be part of our problem. So we could say this value first. Now because of order of operations, what I want to do is add pixels to it. I probably don't have to put in parentheses, but I'm just being safe here. Now this is going to be a string. We don't need to interpret this in JavaScript. We just need it to show up in what's sent to the HTML, because it's used to seeing just plain string text that says a number plus pixels. So we'll try that out. In fact, I'm going to copy this and put it in here. Just so I can see what kind of value that's giving back to us. So not a number of pixels or nan pixels. Okay, I'm going to do more investigation on what pad itself is giving here. Undefined. So if I look type of and try and figure out, so I can do console.log type of 42. Let's try console.log type of pad. See what happens. We want to investigate what type it is. Okay, it's still coming up as undefined. I might need a method there. I'll try that. Okay, it's not function, so I don't need to put parentheses on it. We'll come back to this later.